50,000 years ago, Earth burned. The sky was ablaze with firestorms, and the oceans roiled under orbital bombardment. Cities that had stood for centuries were reduced to molten ruins. Forests vaporized into ash, and mountains carved into jagged fragments by the relentless assault of alien weapons. Humanity had fought with courage, intelligence, and desperation. Against the technological might of the Axilla Dominion, every human advantage, every fleet, every weapon, every strategy was rendered obsolete. Their fleets, once the pride of the Sol system, were shattered before they even reached the first orbital defenses. Humanity's last planetary armies fell in hours, and the few who survived were scattered into exile, leaving Earth to the victors. The Axilla Dominion, a species whose pride equaled its cruelty, celebrated the conquest as a masterpiece of imperial efficiency. Across the galaxy, the conquest of Earth became a legend, a cautionary tale. The Dominion painted humanity as insignificant, fragile, and finally extinct. Entire sectors displayed holovid broadcasts of the planet's destruction, accompanied by the solemn warning any species that defied the Axilla would meet the same fate. Children across countless worlds learned the story of Earth, not as a memory of life, but as a warning of annihilation. The humans were supposed to be gone, a relic erased from the galaxy's collective consciousness. But humans endure. That was the one truth the Axilla had failed to comprehend. In the shadows of exile, humanity did not die, it adapted. The survivors fled to the hidden corners of the galaxy, to icy moons orbiting dark stars, to barren asteroids that no sensors could detect, and to rogue planets drifting between systems. Every refuge became a crucible for survival, every generation a forge for cunning, ingenuity, and resilience. Humans learned to thrive where no other species could, evolving not biologically, but technologically and socially, perfecting methods of communication, navigation, and war that even the Axilla could not imagine. In these isolated systems, humans did not simply survive. They transformed their exile into an opportunity. On worlds where life was nearly impossible, they built cities beneath ice sheets, habitats buried in mountains, and orbital colonies hidden in asteroid belts. Technology advanced in ways that seemed impossible to any outside observer. Ships capable of instantaneous hyperspace jumps were perfected. Weapons capable of neutralizing fleets without planetary destruction were designed. And energy shields that could shrug off torrents of plasma were engineered. Every exile system became a laboratory. Every human generation a repository of knowledge. Every fleet a promise of revenge. For 50 millennia, the Terran diaspora remained invisible. Across the galaxy, the Dominion's fleets patrolled space, assuming humanity extinct, unaware that every move they made had been observed and recorded. Humans watched silently as the Axilla built fleets, fortified colonies, and extended their dominion. They cataloged technology, strategies, and weaknesses. They waited. Patience was humanity's greatest weapon. Where other species might have retaliated immediately, driven by anger or hubris, humans studied, refined, and prepared. They understood the value of time, the power of observation, and the inevitability of precision. Even legends began to circulate, whispered among the stars. Siler historians mocked stories of the starborn Terrans, myths of humans who could outthink fleets, anticipate strategies, and manipulate events across light years. They called them fairy tales, exaggerations, fantasies. But in hidden human archives, those same legends were carefully documented, enhanced, and taught as strategy manuals. Every story, every myth, every supposed exaggeration became training for the eventual return. The galaxy assumed that victory meant the end. Entire civilizations relied on the idea that humanity was gone. Colonies that had once resisted the exile had been pacified, their records rewritten, their populations indoctrinated to believe that humans were a species of the past. Trade, diplomacy, and warfare proceeded under the shadow of this assumed absence. The exiler, confident in their supremacy, never imagined that the very species they had tried to erase was watching, learning, and preparing. Then came the subtle signs. At first, they were dismissed, sensors detecting fleeting energy fluctuations, communication signals that vanished before analysis, ships appearing where none should exist. Analysts blamed cosmic interference, miscalibrated instruments, and statistical anomalies. Fleet commanders laughed off reports of sudden disappearances and unexpected appearances. They assumed no species could survive 50,000 years of exile, let alone develop the capability to challenge a galactic empire. But humans were not merely surviving. They were orchestrating the beginning of their return. Hidden fleets began moving through uncharted hyperspace corridors, small contingents probing exiler defenses, testing vulnerabilities, and mapping enemy fleets with precision. Every maneuver was deliberate, every action calculated. The humans had learned to strike invisibly, to move undetected, and to operate in perfect coordination across centuries and light years. They had turned patience into a weapon, and the galaxy was blind to it. The Emperor of the Exilar Dominion, seated on his throne aboard the Citadel Obsidian, proclaimed humanity extinct. His advisors, generals, and officers echoed the certainty, confident that no species, once broken, could return after 50 millennia. They did not anticipate the patience of humans, the perfection of their strategy, or the inevitability of their vengeance. They did not account for the species that had survived the fall of their homeworld, mastered exile, and turned every lost generation into an instrument of precision and foresight. Humanity's return would not be a storm of chaos or indiscriminate fury. It would be a revelation. The myths, the legends, the stories dismissed as impossible would manifest in cold, undeniable reality. The galaxy had assumed victory, assumed dominance, and assumed humanity was gone. And in that assumption lay its greatest peril. For 50,000 years, humans had endured, adapted, and perfected themselves. Every exile system, every secret fleet, every hidden laboratory had prepared for this moment. The Exiler Dominion believed they had conquered a species. In truth, they had sown the seeds of a reckoning that would span light years, incapacitate fleets, and redefine power in the galaxy. Earth may have been taken, but humanity survived. And one day, the galaxy would remember. The legends would return, and with them, the full weight of human ingenuity, resilience, and vengeance. The starborn Terrans, exiled and forgotten, were about to reclaim their legacy. The Exiler had thought victory eternal. They were wrong. The humans waited, and when they struck, the galaxy would tremble. For centuries, the Exiler Dominion patrolled the sectors where Earth's descendants were said to have fled. Sensors swept star systems, fleets scoured hyperspace lanes, and intelligence officers monitored communications across light years. And yet, anomalies began to appear. At first, they were dismissed as glitches, cosmic interference, or overactive imaginations. Entire squadrons reported fleeting energy signatures that vanished the moment sensors attempted to lock onto them. Patrol vessels passed through asteroid belts, only to discover that coordinates did not match any charted system. Communications intercepted from unknown sources were brief, unintelligible, and impossible to trace. But these were no accidents. Hidden in the most obscure corners of the galaxy, the Terran Armada had begun to emerge. Small reconnaissance fleets slipped through uncharted hyperspace corridors, moving unseen past the eyes of exiler scanners. Every probe, every frigate, every scout was deliberate, testing response times, gauging patrol patterns, and recording weaknesses. Humanity's strategy was centuries in the making, its patience perfected over millennia of exile. These initial movements were the whispers before the storm, a demonstration of the inevitability of human precision. The first real encounter occurred in the Exi-Tel system, a once bustling industrial hub now under exiler control. A patrol fleet of 5 dreadnoughts moved confidently along established routes, unaware of the silent shadows slipping into the periphery. Sensors detected energy fluctuations, brief, pulsing, almost imperceptible, but the fleet commander ignored them. The humans had learned long ago that arrogance was a tool. The exiler assumed superiority, and that assumption would become their undoing. Then, without warning, a human reconnaissance vessel emerged from hyperspace in the dead zone between 2 cruisers. Its hull shimmered with adaptive energy fields that deflected every scan. Engines left no detectable signature. No weapons were fired, and yet the dreadnoughts froze, systems locking inexplicably, as if the very laws of physics had bent around the intruder. The crew could not respond. Communications jammed. Weapons locked. Engines failed. The humans had demonstrated power without violence, control without destruction, a lesson the exiler would never forget. Within moments, more ships appeared, arriving from multiple hidden corridors, their formations flawless, their movements coordinated across light years. Frigates moved to disable propulsion systems, cruisers targeted command nodes, and energy fields suppressed weapon arrays. Entire fleets were rendered immobile, drifting like abandoned relics in the void. No shots were fired, no lasers cut through the blackness. The Terrans were not destroying, they were demonstrating inevitability. Every maneuver anticipated, every counter neutralized before it could be executed. The exiler Dominion realized with mounting horror that they faced not just survivors, but masters of strategy honed over 50,000 years. A transmission cut through the void, calm, deliberate, and coldly precise. You believed us gone. You believed us extinct. You were wrong. Earth is not forgotten. Humanity endures. The message shattered the assumptions of every fleet commander. Doubt spread like wildfire through the ranks. Analysts attempted to rationalize the impossible, scanning logs over and over, but the anomalies were too precise to be accidental. The humans were orchestrating a return, moving unseen, striking without destruction, and leaving the exiler paralyzed. Legends whispered across the galaxy, the starborn Terrans, tales dismissed as myth were manifesting in reality. Across multiple sectors, the pattern repeated. Patrols found fleets immobilized, stations cut off from communications, and command hubs paralyzed. The humans had not yet unleashed full power. They were teaching the galaxy a lesson in precision and inevitability. Each encounter reinforced the same truth. The species that had vanished 50,000 years ago was not only alive, but had mastered control in a way that no empire had ever anticipated. The emperor, far removed in his orbital throne world, was still confident. His fleets were vast, his command absolute. He could not believe the reports. "Humans cannot endure this long," he said. "They are myths, exaggerations. All calculations indicate extinction." Yet the anomalies persisted. Entire sectors reported drifting fleets, immobilized dreadnoughts, and disabled weapon arrays. Even his most loyal advisors began to murmur doubts. Humanity was returning, and every assumption the Dominion had relied upon was unraveling. The Terran Armada's advance was not reckless. It was surgical, deliberate, and slow enough to ensure observation and calculation. Every fleet encountered, every patrol disabled, served as a lesson to the exiler: underestimate us at your peril. The humans were patient, precise, and calculating. They had waited 50 millennia for this moment. Every step of their emergence reinforced the certainty of their inevitability. By the end of the first wave, the galaxy's perception had shifted. Where once the exiler had assumed dominance, now fear and awe replaced confidence. Across fleets and command centers, the same realization dawned. The legends were real, the myths had returned, and humanity's vengeance was not just a threat, it was unavoidable. The whispers in the void were no longer whispers. They were the first movements of a storm, one that would sweep across the galaxy, paralyze fleets, liberate worlds, and reclaim the legacy of Earth. And through it all, the humans remained unseen, perfectly coordinated, teaching the galaxy an immutable truth: presence alone can be a weapon, and underestimation of humanity is a fatal error. The galaxy held its breath, unknowing that the storm had only begun. Humanity had returned. The exiler would soon learn that every fleet, every colony, every plan they had relied upon for 50,000 years was irrelevant against a species that had waited, adapted, and perfected the art of inevitability. When the Terran Armada emerged fully from hiding, the galaxy felt it immediately. Across multiple sectors, Scylla fleets encountered what could only be described as perfection in motion. Every ship, from nimble frigates to colossal command dreadnoughts, moved with flawless coordination. Engines hummed with adaptive energy, shielding glimmered with fields that could anticipate attacks, and weapon systems, though present, remained restrained until absolutely necessary. Humanity had waited 50 millennia for this moment, and their patience made every strike inevitable, precise, and devastating in its effect. The first major engagement occurred in the Typhon cluster, a strategic exiler supply hub. The station, bristling with orbital defenses and surrounded by a fleet of cruisers and dreadnoughts, had never before faced resistance it could not predict. Yet, within moments of the Terran arrival, systems began to fail. Engines froze mid-burn, weapons arrays jammed, communications fell silent. Fleets attempted evasive maneuvers, but every vector was anticipated. It was as though the human ships were not simply responding, they were a single, unified intelligence operating across light years, manipulating the battlefield with near-omniscient foresight. The humans did not fire indiscriminately. Instead, they struck surgically. Command nodes were neutralized first, disabling fleet coordination. Power grids were disrupted, leaving dreadnoughts adrift and weapon systems unresponsive. Supply depots were rendered inert, and hyperdrive corridors were blocked by adaptive gravitational fields, preventing reinforcements from arriving. Entire sectors became paralyzed without the loss of a single civilian life. Humanity's revenge was not blind fury. It was judgment, deliberate and undeniable. Fleet commanders of the Exiler Dominion attempted counterattacks, issuing orders that had once been executed with unwavering efficiency. Ships swerved, energy beams fired, and missiles launched, but every move had been foreseen. Shields absorbed plasma bursts before impact. Propulsion systems corrected for every vector, and human crews anticipated countermeasures with perfect timing. The Terran Armada struck with inevitability, each maneuver designed not to destroy indiscriminately, but to incapacitate completely. The flagship, the Aegis of Sol, became the focal point of this revelation. Massive, yet sleek, black and silver, and alive with energy veins coursing along its hull, it moved with authority across the battlefield. Its very presence radiated control. From its bridge, transmissions were broadcast to every corner of the cluster, cutting through static and fear alike. You believed us extinct. You believed our defeat absolute. You were wrong. Earth is remembered, humanity endures, and your dominion ends today. The words struck the Exiler with a force more devastating than any weapon. Panic rippled across fleets. Officers froze, crews hesitated, and strategies unraveled mid-execution. Centuries of training proved insufficient. Every calculation, every contingency, every doctrine relied upon by the Dominion had been anticipated and neutralized. The humans did not merely fight, they demonstrated mastery of inevitability. Across the Typhon cluster, orbital installations fell silent. Dreadnoughts drifted inert, their crews bewildered but unharmed. Supply convoys were intercepted with surgical precision. Entire planetary defenses were neutralized, not destroyed. The humans were showing the galaxy that power without control is meaningless. True supremacy lay in foresight, intelligence, and the ability to act with inevitability. The Terran strike extended across neighboring sectors. Fleets, moving to reinforce Typhon, found themselves immobilized en route, caught in adaptive energy fields that disrupted engines and communications. Supply lines were severed. Command structures collapsed, and every attempt at coordination failed. Humanity's reach had become multi-sectoral, orchestrated with precision that spanned thousands of light years. Even the Emperor, ensconced aboard his flagship Obsidian throne, watched helplessly. His fleets, once symbols of absolute power, were paralyzed in multiple sectors. Entire fleets of cruisers and dreadnoughts drifted useless, their weapons inert, their crews powerless. The humans had proven that dominance is not measured by numbers or firepower alone. A species that had survived millennia of exile could strike with precision, patience, and intelligence far surpassing any conventional measure of military might. The psychological effect was catastrophic. Across the Exiler Dominion, fear replaced arrogance. Officers hesitated, governors questioned orders, and civilian populations whispered the impossible. Humanity was back, and they were unstoppable. Every fleet immobilized, every planet liberated, every station neutralized, reinforced the same immutable truth: underestimate humans at your peril. The Terran Armada's counterstrike was not overkill. It was a demonstration of inevitability. The humans had returned not to conquer indiscriminately, but to reclaim their legacy, dismantle the instruments of oppression, and teach the galaxy that a species once thought extinct could shape the destiny of civilizations across millennia. By the end of the engagement, the Typhon cluster was liberated. Fleets drifted inert, installations neutralized, and planetary populations untouched yet freed from exilor control. The humans withdrew in perfect formation, leaving a message embedded in the very structure of the battlefield. The galaxy must remember, the species cannot be erased, and vengeance may come in silence, patience, and inevitability. Humanity had struck. They had proven that after 50,000 years of exile, they were not just survivors. They were legends made real, arbiters of precision, and masters of inevitability. Across the galaxy, fleets, governments, and civilizations would never again underestimate humanity. The return had begun, and the exiler Dominion had learned the first of many lessons. Conquest does not guarantee control. Patience, intelligence, and inevitability can overturn empires. The storm was coming, and humanity's revenge was absolute. The impact of the Terran counterstrike spread faster than any weapon the exiler had ever deployed. Across multiple sectors, fleets that had once inspired fear lay paralyzed, drifting silently through space. Orbital stations, once symbols of imperial might, were immobilized, their defenses neutralized without a single casualty. Entire planetary systems reeled from the revelation that a species they had considered extinct had returned not to beg, negotiate, or plead, but to reclaim their legacy with precise and unassailable power. Governors and fleet commanders struggled to comprehend the scale of their failure. Protocols that had governed the galaxy for centuries collapsed. Command chains fractured as officers hesitated, unsure whether issuing orders would provoke human response or worsen the crisis. The exiler emperor's once absolute authority became symbolic rather than practical. Fleets drifted unmanned, colonies lost contact, and communication networks fell into disarray. The psychological shock was as devastating as any physical attack. Fear, disbelief, and awe swept across every level of governance. The humans did not linger in devastation. Their strategy was one of demonstration, not conquest. Every paralyzed fleet, every neutralized installation, and every liberated system was a message. Dominance without foresight is meaningless, and arrogance toward humanity is fatal. Planets were freed, yet untouched. Civilians observed the Terran presence only from the safety of orbit, unable to mistake the calculated restraint for mercy, but recognizing it as an inevitable demonstration of control. Across the galaxy, scholars, generals, and diplomats scrambled to recalibrate their understanding of power. Military academies rewrote doctrines mid-session, attempting to analyze the Terran approach. Fleets were reorganized, but every countermeasure that had been relied upon for centuries failed against humans who anticipated, adapted, and neutralized before action could even be taken. Political alliances shifted as governors and planetary leaders reconsidered loyalty to a dominion now shown vulnerable. The Terran return reshaped the political landscape, even as humans quietly withdrew from immediate engagement. The exiler emperor, ensconced aboard his flagship Obsidian throne, was forced to confront the impossible. The fleets he had relied upon to enforce his will were immobilized. Command structures he had built over centuries were disrupted beyond repair. Every contingency he had planned for the unexpected failed. In his pride, he had assumed humanity was extinct. In his arrogance, he had assumed they were weak. Now, his empire was fractured, and his knowledge of control rendered obsolete. The lesson was bitter, immediate, and undeniable. The species he had sought to erase had endured, evolved, and mastered the art of inevitability. Even civilians felt the impact. Across liberated systems, life resumed quietly. Trade routes reopened, markets stabilized, and governance structures reorganized under local authority. The humans had demonstrated dominance not through destruction, but through precise and calculated restraint. By immobilizing fleets and neutralizing key infrastructure, they had rewritten the balance of power without inflicting the kind of indiscriminate devastation the exiler had expected. The galaxy was learning, quickly and painfully, that survival, intelligence, and patience were as deadly as any weapon. The Terran influence extended beyond the battlefield. Every empire, every council, and every fleet began to reevaluate the limits of ambition, the risk of underestimation, and the meaning of strategic foresight. Across the sectors, reports of immobilized fleets and liberated systems spread like wildfire, transforming propaganda into history and myth into reality. The Exiler Dominion had underestimated humans, and that misjudgment had permanent consequences. Across the galaxy, civilizations recognized that dominance could no longer be asserted through force alone. Strategy, foresight, and patience had redefined what it meant to wield power. In every affected system, one truth became clear: humanity endures. The species that had been erased from memory had returned not to rule, not to plunder, but to demonstrate capability, foresight, and inevitability. Myths, whispered across centuries, were now visible, tangible, undeniable. Fleet commanders, governors, and scholars alike acknowledged the same reality. Humans were no longer merely survivors, they were arbiters of consequence, exemplars of strategy, and living legends whose patience and foresight had no peer. By the end of the campaign, the Exiler Dominion had been fractured in both spirit and structure. Fleets drifted inert across multiple sectors. Entire planetary systems operated independently or resisted authority, and political cohesion across the Empire had collapsed. The Emperor's pride had been shattered. The Dominion had survived physically, but its ability to project absolute power was broken. Humanity had demonstrated that real power is measured not by fleets alone, but by foresight, coordination, and the capacity to act with inevitability. The galaxy, though temporarily stabilizing under weakened control, would never again assume that humanity's absence meant weakness. Every empire recalibrated its understanding of strategy and survival. Every fleet, every colony, and every council recognized that underestimation of humans carried consequences of unparalleled magnitude. Humanity had returned, and their presence, though momentarily withdrawn, had permanently transformed the balance of power. The Terran legacy was not destruction. It was inevitability. Across the stars, the reminder was clear. Earth may have been taken 50,000 years ago, but humanity survives, adapts, and asserts its influence in ways that no empire, no matter how mighty, can ignore. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Underestimate humans, and the consequences are absolute, irreversible, and eternal. And in the silence of space, as immobilized fleets and liberated planets adjusted to the new reality, the Terran Armada observed from unseen corridors of hyperspace, waiting for the next step, patient, precise, and inevitable. Humanity had returned. The galaxy would never forget. After the Terran Armada's decisive strikes, the galaxy fell into an uneasy silence. Entire Exiler fleets drifted inert, command hierarchies fractured, and planetary defenses remained neutralized. Yet no human ship lingered to occupy or dominate. Humanity's goal had never been conquest. Their return was deliberate, a demonstration of inevitability, patience, and precision. The humans sought to remind the galaxy of a singular truth: underestimate humanity, and the consequences are absolute. Withdrawal was executed with the same meticulous precision as the strikes themselves. Terran vessels slipped into uncharted hyperspace corridors, disappearing from observation, leaving behind immobilized fleets, liberated worlds, and intact civilizations. Planets once oppressed under imperial dominion now resumed self-governance. Infrastructure was repaired by the liberated populations, communications restored, and the natural rhythms of life resumed, all without interference from the humans who had returned to remind the galaxy of their enduring presence. Every action, or deliberate inaction, left a message. Humanity is eternal, intelligent, and capable of reshaping the galaxy without firing a single indiscriminate shot. Imperial authorities struggled to regroup. Fleets, though physically repaired over time, lacked cohesion and morale. Governors hesitated in issuing orders, unsure whether compliance would satisfy humans or invite further intervention. Political alliances fractured as civilizations recalibrated their loyalty and strategies in light of the Terran demonstration. Even the Emperor, whose command had set the events into motion, recognized that his authority remained only as a shadow of its former self. He understood, at last, that arrogance toward humans is fatal. Every fleet he had relied upon for dominance had been outmaneuvered, centuries of strategic planning unraveled in hours. The consequences of underestimating humanity would echo for generations. Scholarship and military doctrine across the galaxy transformed in response to the Terran return. Academies revised teaching to account for strategies that anticipated, neutralized, and incapacitated entire fleets without the loss of civilian life. Engineers experimented with energy fields, propulsion systems, and eye coordination inspired by Terran technology. Historians recorded the events with awe, noting not only humanity's power, but the restraint, precision, and inevitability that distinguished them from all other civilizations. The Terran return became a benchmark against which intelligence, patience, and foresight would be measured for millennia. Civilian populations, meanwhile, experienced liberation quietly and definitively. Where the Exilar had once imposed rule through intimidation, the Terrans had introduced the concept of power without tyranny. Systems, once oppressed, resumed governance under local leadership. Fleets repaired themselves without interference, and trade routes resumed under a new understanding of risk and consequence. Humanity's return had rewritten the calculus of survival and authority. Strength alone does not secure compliance. Intelligence, patience, and inevitability do. Even legends of the starborn Terrans, long dismissed as myth, became tangible reality. Every commander, every historian, every political leader now recognized that humanity is enduring, adaptable, and unmatched in strategic mastery. 50,000 years of exile had produced not desperation, but perfection. Humanity had survived the fall of its homeworld, endured millennia of obscurity, and returned with an intellect, foresight, and discipline that no species could rival. Myths, whispered across generations, now walk the stars as undeniable truth. The Terran presence reshaped the fundamental understanding of power across the galaxy. Fleets were rebuilt with caution, strategies rewritten, and the arrogance of countless empires tempered by the memory of inevitability. Civilizations knew that any miscalculation regarding humanity could result in paralysis, defeat, or obliteration. Where humans had struck, a lesson had been etched into the fabric of galactic society. Even absence can be a weapon, even patience can be a form of dominance, and underestimation of humanity is always fatal. The withdrawal of the Terran Armada did not diminish their influence. It amplified it. The demonstration of power, restraint, and strategic genius resonated far beyond the immediate theaters of engagement. Systems liberated without violence inspired awe and fear in equal measure. Fleets immobilized without destruction became enduring symbols of control. Across the galaxy, humans became a benchmark, a species whose endurance, intelligence, and inevitability defined the limits of power itself. In the quiet of hyperspace corridors, the Terran Armada observed the galaxy with perfect patience. They had reminded civilizations that humans endure, adapt, and reclaim what is theirs. They had struck with surgical precision, paralyzed fleets, liberated planets, and withdrawn without tyranny. The message was simple, unambiguous, and eternal. Humanity may be absent for millennia, but it is never gone, and its return will always be absolute. The starborn humans had survived extermination, endured exile, and returned not to conquer, but to demonstrate the supremacy of foresight, patience, and intelligence. They had taught the galaxy that true power lies in inevitability, that strategy can surpass numbers, and that patience can outlast the arrogance of empires. The Exceler Dominion, once supreme, now existed under the shadow of their lesson. Every empire, fleet, and civilization would remember. Humans endure, and humanity's revenge is absolute. And so, as the Terran Armada vanished into hidden corridors of hyperspace, leaving fleets immobilized, liberated planets, and a galaxy forever transformed, one certainty remained. The memory of their inevitability would echo across the stars for all time. Earth may have been taken 50,000 years ago, but humanity endures, and no force in the galaxy could erase the lesson of their return. The humans had returned, the galaxy had learned, and the legend of humanity would endure forever.